Kushida snaps and Hirata breaks and someone else may be expelled. This volume is insane. Let's get into it. We start sometime in February, a little bit of time before the class vote special exam was announced. The facility of the school went busy non-stop. They were preparing things for the students, from promotions, graduations, and even expulsions. Not to count the final special exams for the whole of the student body. Day after day, you had teachers stuck doing work. They had no freedom to do anything but devote themselves to this very thing. The teachers of the first year had a lot to think about, even more than their colleagues. A lone man began his explanation on the final exam for the teachers of the first year. Compared to the second and third year, the explanations for this exam was a little bit unusual. A tense atmosphere. Silence filled the room. As the man asked if there were any questions, a few seconds pass. If I may, acting director Sakishiro, with a slight raise of a hand, Class A's homeroom teacher, Mashima, happened to break the silence engulfing this very room. Sakishiro had noticed. No, he knew that many of the teachers were having doubts in his plan, but also thought it would be unreasonable if they weren't a little bit doubtful. You could say he was assessing their values as human beings. Sakishiro wanted to see if these teachers were working members of society, or just the ones who come in for the quick check. Mashima-sensei went on to say the special exams for the second and third years are as difficult as the previous, but the first year student exam he finds more difficult than usual, leading to a huge risk of expulsions due to this class vote exam. You see, Mashima was doing this as he cared for the sake of the students' future, even going as far to protest to their acting director Sakishiro. He went on and stated that Sakishiro had only been appointed at the school and he understands his decision, but also thinks it inappropriate to force expulsions just because there hasn't been any this year. I gotta say, after this, I have a lot more respect for Mashima. Sticking up to a man like Sakishiro, the acting director. This guy's got balls of steel. Sakishiro began to grin. You could see his white toothy smile. He went to say that the students had to fear getting expelled in every exam so far, and went to judge the school saying an ordinary high school student wouldn't expel a student for failing just from 1 mark. Well, to an extent I can get. Sakishiro is really trying to say, hey, this school is tough, and me involving these rules doesn't really mean too much. You see, the school holds special exams throughout the whole year, keeping them all at an acceptable range of difficulty. Within this range, students of the first year managed to pass all exams without any expulsions. We don't know if this is because the first year is deemed easier as the others, or maybe the level, what we're seeing here in the first year, is something never seen before. For Mashima, this is good, and he wants to facilitate this for as long as possible, before another man, for acting director Sakishiro. This was different. Sakishiro asked Mashima if it's about getting numerous students expelled, wouldn't this exam do the same thing? Mashima claps back and says he cannot approve of an exam that practically forces expulsions. All the teachers sat in silence, but one man, Mashima, rose up to the occasion and refused to back down. Carried on and said that Sakishiro introduced a new system for the final exam they have never ever seen before. And hell, he didn't give him a reason for it either. But we knew the reason of Sakishiro's doing. This was because of one student. One man, by the name of Kiyotaka Ayanokoji. Now, a lot of you may be confused if you watch my Volume 7 video. You might think, who the fuck is Sakishiro? Well, let's take this back a little bit. Volume 10, after the class vote special exam. Kiyotaka and sakyanagi met up in an empty building to discuss a little bit, but they were met with a man in a suit. He said it was his first time at the school and asked the two if they knew where the staff room was. Sakyanagi stated he came to the wrong place, but also asked who he was. To which he replied, his name is Sakishiro, and he's the acting director of the school for the time being. Began to wave, and had a gentle smile of the two. All of a sudden, Sakyanagi wasn't having it with a 200 IQ. She even laughed. Fufu, it seems you have quite the poor taste of direction. Or perhaps you decided to pay us a visit after seeing two of us meet here on the security camera last time? Wouldn't it be hard for you to come here if you've always been keeping an eye on it? Now, this is weird. If you go back to Volume 5, I do believe it was, this is the spot where Kiyotaka and Sakyanagi were both in. And if we also go back to that volume at the end, Sakyanagi gives the camera an unnatural look. What is wild, because you can see how big brain Sakyanagi was from all that long ago. And if I'm not mistaken, if this was Volume 5, this is amazing foreshadowing. Author of this series really never ceases to amaze me. Sakishiro just smiled and ignored the words she just said, saying she was amusing and wonders if all the students are like this. He began to walk forward a little, like he was about to walk between them. Sakyanagi interrupted and said he was looking for the staff room, and he should go back as he's in the wrong building. But he didn't say anything. He just had the same smile, and he launched a kick, knocking Sakyanagi's cane out of her hand. Of course, she began to fall over, to which Kiyotaka reached out and grabbed a hold of her, stopping the falling, only to be immediately hit with a strike by Sakishiro's elbow, aiming at his body. Kiyotaka had no choice but to take the blow head-on as he was holding onto Sakyanagi, but resisted the impact to the best of his ability. He let Sakyanagi down, and a man came grabbing Kiyotaka by the neck and pinning him to the wall with superhuman strength. You're not as good as the rumors say, Ayanokoji Kiyotaka-kun. Kiyotaka says he couldn't make a sound due to the force of his throat being pressed so hard. Sakisho went on to say that Sakyanagi was sent instructions to have Kiyotaka expelled. She realized this was the message from one of his associates. Since the school can't force her expulsion, therefore they had no choice but to rely on her. She smiled, and as she got up, she thanked Kiyotaka for helping her, and went to say Sakishiro's violent behavior wouldn't go unnoticed. But Sakisho explained that he doesn't need to worry as the cameras are set to show dummy footage, so it won't be showing any recording of what just happened here. He said to Kiyotaka he has a message from his father. He has no interest in playing this childish game, and he wants him to come home immediately. And for Kiyotaka to blink twice if he understood. Sakisho really had a tight grip on Kiyotaka. He couldn't speak. It wasn't even an option to refuse. Kiyotaka knew it was something that man would do. Sakisho began to mumble as he got bored of Kiyotaka's unresponsive silence. Why don't you show a little bit of resistance? Show me something a normal kid wouldn't. He began to tighten even more. This man was a skilled opponent. He was thoroughly trained. A normal student couldn't deal with him. He tried to provoke Kiyotaka more and more and kept asking him to show him a little more. But Kiyotaka wouldn't crack. In the end, Sakisho realized this fact and loosened his grip. He began to exit the special building but left some last words. I officially take office at the school in April. Please do look forward to it. With that, he walked out the special building. Well, that gets everyone up to speed, I would hope at least. Just a wild ending to Volume 10, and the introduction of Sakisho changes a lot within the series. It can really put it in any direction. Just exciting stuff, in my opinion. With that, let's get back to Volume 11. Mashima and Sakisho continued to go on, but the reality was, as long as Mashima was just the teacher, he had no chance against the acting director, Sakisho. The whole argument, you could say, was just a farce from Sakisho's words. Everything he said, sure, had some truth to it, but the only reason he was doing this was to get Kiyotaka Ayanokoji expelled. Due to this, others had to be dragged in. While on the other side you had Mashima, who's in the dark and doesn't understand anything in this situation. He feels that it's great that no one has gotten expelled in the first year and wants it to continue. Still trying Mashima continue, but the decision had already been made. The class vote exam was already put in place and set. Mashima-sensei, that's enough. A third party intervened. It was Chabashira. She had stopped the words about to pour out from the bottom of Mashima's core. Mashima knew his words will amount to nothing. Sakisho had all the power in the world to do what he wanted, as long as the government approves of it, and what he was doing wasn't outside the rules. Yes, it was harsh and unfair, but the government had no proof of this. As the tense atmosphere began to calm down, Sakisho mentioned the current chairman Sakyanagi, and how he's put under house arrest due to suspicions of improper conduct. With a single clap of the hand, Sakisho looks around and says he wants to leave things off here, but stopped to say he wants to hold a cultural festival next year. But the teachers were confused and mentioned that the school shouldn't involve opening up to the outside world. But Sakisho wasn't having this. He responded in saying the old-fashioned way of thinking is problematic, and the school would need to undergo changes. They will do this carefully by choosing who they invite inside. In other words, you could say some or all the associates invited inside are white room members, having to do with Kiyotaka's father, and this cultural festival, if it is to happen, would be disastrous. With that, he left the conversation there. The teachers knew that the battle would come to an end, and they were powerless to do anything. After Sakisho had left the staff room, Chabashiro had called over Mashima and Hoshinomiya. Both have been her friends and rivals who she competed against at this very school. Hoshinomiya went to state it is depressing to announce this exam, as someone will be expelled from it. She sighed and looked down at the attendance record, muttering her thoughts. I wonder who's going to disappear. They still have some options. The options being overriding the expulsions with 20 million private points. But the harsh reality was, none of the classes even had this many points saved up. Usually it would cost 20 million private points and 300 class points, but due to the nature of the exam, the class points were exempt. Chabashiro went to state that she was dissatisfied with Sakishiro's way of doing things, and Hoshinomiya agreed, saying he came out of nowhere and just did what he wanted. But Mashima interjected, saying if they complained they would catch the sack, to where Chabashiro added that Sakisho could fire all the teachers for all he cares and get replacements. Hoshinomiya told Chabashiro not to do anything crazy as they went through hell to get to Class C. Chabashiro responded to her, saying she seems pretty calm, even though they're closing the gap. Hoshinomiya, surprised, questioned her, asking if she's fantasizing and really reaching Class A. No, not even I'm that foolish, Chabashiro added. Mashima, getting tired of their silly conversation, added the two were still fussing over what happened back then, before being cut off by the two, saying that has nothing to do with it. The two glared at him, forcing him to back off. Although Mashima was ballsy enough to go against Sakisho, there was no way he would go against these two very women. Chabashiro walked away annoyed. To where Mashima gave Hoshinomiya a piece of advice, saying to be careful of this year's Class C, as they are different than usual. That's my boy Kiyotaka. Hoshinomiya added that she doesn't need to worry, as she has Ichinose, but if they ever seem to be getting close, she would pummel them down herself. Mashima, surprised, asked if she would really stick her nose into student competition. She added that she wouldn't do anything like that. Mashima added that she sounds serious. That's because I can't afford to lose Sai-chan. This was the type of relationship they had, both as teachers and as rivals. With that, we end chapter 1. Nice start to the volume, I gotta say. We had more insight to Sakishido and got some backsight into the class vote exam and how it really came about. All really done to get rid of Kiyotaka. What's the wild part? And the relationship between Hoshinome and Chabashira, I can't help but get really invested in the story, and I want to know what the past is all about, and hope we can get a backstory one day, even if a whole volume covers it, because that would be amazing. Nice start though, we got to see the lengths what everyone would go through to fight for what they want. Now let's continue and get to chapter 2. The fun is only starting, wait around. March 8th. Chabashira would soon be announcing the final exam to the former Class D, now C. There are 39 desks now in the class. There were 40 until a few days ago. This was because Yamauchi Haruki had just been expelled from the class vote. But it wasn't just Class C who suffered. From Class D, Manabe, and from Class A, Yahiko. All of the students felt the impact of this. All of the hopes that there may have been a way out have now been shattered. The bell sounded and walks in Chabashira. Kiyotaka thought to himself. He was right that no one would say anything about Yamauchi, not Sudo or Ike, his closest friends. I guess they were really coming to terms with reality. Chabashira went on to explain that we'll finish off the year with one final special exam, and we'll have a show for the culmination of everything they have learned until now. This includes knowledge, physical ability, cooperation, and hell, even a little bit of luck. To sum it up, they needed to show what they were all about. This was strange, because by now Sensei would have had a barrage of questions coming our way about the exam. But everyone was just listening in. Even Ike, who would go out of his way to complain. They were all just sitting there quietly. This was because they all knew they could be next to be expelled. We got more information on this exam, the name being the Event Selection Exam, which classes would compete in terms of comprehensive ability. The class they'll be facing along with the rules are similar to the paper shuffle exam. She began a simple explanation. She put 10 white cards and a certain number of yellow, molded after the students in the class. She lined them up, and while the white cards had nothing on them, the yellow cards seemed to have the students' names written on them. To tally up a total of 48 cards were attached to the blackboard. Although there was one yes yellow card when they were students, this seemed to be significant. So what are the purpose of these cards? Let's start with the white ones. There are 10 white cards. With these, the students are set to discuss and decide on 10 events they would like to do, and put them on the cards. As she went to explain, there was a very difficult expression on the face of Ike. Of course it's fucking Ike. Just expel this kid already. Let's fucking expel him. Out of character, Chabashira said if there's anything on their minds, and asked them to speak up if there was. Which was strange, because the old sensei would have waited to the end, but now she's asking the students directly? Something different from her, but we're not really used to seeing. I guess you could say she's changing slowly. Now sensei goes over some events they could do. For example, writing, shogi, playing cards, even baseball. Students are free to write down any events they can come up with. Although this comes with some of the restrictions. For example, if they were to choose a contest or a game that not many people are familiar with, then it may get rejected, so therefore all events must be fair and easy to understand. So after they submit their events, the school will judge if they're appropriate and act as the final say in this matter, which comes with other regulations to prevent some things. Pretty much they're set to come up with rules so a tie does not happen, and to prevent neutral outcome events to ensure that someone comes out on top. The sensei says she would illustrate it so someone like Ike could understand. So she asks a simple question. Ike, what are you good at? What am I good at? Began to think I couldn't come up with anything on the spot. Really? Of course it's fucking Ike who does this. He began to speak, and he couldn't come up with anything. But finally he spat out something like rock, paper, scissors. Bro, this bad. Expel him. Please, expel him. This caused the class to laugh due to the ridiculous answer that Ike just mentioned. But Chabashira took it for real and wrote it on one of the cards. The class was left with dumbfounded expressions. She goes further and asks what are the rules. Ike went along and said best out of 5. She wrote this down on the card and even added, this is a well-known event and the rules are simple. There is no way the school will reject this idea. So just like that, the most simple game could be chosen. It was easy. Maybe this way Sudo could come up with something to kiss Hirata. After this, Sensei asked the class to do this 9 more times. She also adds the event will be divided into 3 phases. March 8th, the exam will be announced and the class matchups are finalized. March 15th, event selection is finalized and the opposing class's 10 events are revealed. March 22nd, the exam event begins. Now you may think 20 events are a bit much for the last exam, but on the day of the exam, each class will narrow down their events to just 5. Therefore, there'll be 10 events and not 20, to which Hirata interjects and asks if 5 of the events are just bluffs to mislead opponents. Chabashira added that events could play that role, and out of the 10 events chosen, 7 of them will be prepared by the school. Without denying anything Hirata just said, she confirms it at the same time. Kiyotaka thought usually they would hold 7 events to ensure there was a tiebreaker, but due to the nature of no ties in this exam, he made a conclusion of the first class to get 4 wins will win. Sensei adds that even if the outcome is decided, the exam will only end once the final event is cleared. The reason for this, every event holds influence to change in class points. Sensei adds that to pick events by the 14th, and if they don't, the school will come up with pre-arranged events. If this is to happen, it will do more harm than good. They had no choice but to work out what events to do. Hirata asked if there are restrictions on how many times the student is allowed to participate in the events within the exam. Sensei explained that certain portions of the rules would be difficult to understand, therefore she gave a handout to Hirata going to specifics. This got the whole class talking, as they only had 1 week to study, practice, and even formulate plans. The amount of stress Class C must be feeling right now, I wouldn't be able to handle it. Like, Jesus Christ, only a week? To top it off, they'll have to deal with spying from other classes, them trying to figure out what events the other classes are doing. All of that is stressful. She mentioned they'll need to select a commander in order to manage a large number of people. That commander will not be able to participate in the events though. This was the reason there were 38 yellow cards for the class and not 39. Sensei states the commander will be a really important role. You have to adapt on the fly like a support role that helps in every event. For example, the commander is able to substitute a missing player, solve problems that arise, or just isn't limited to sports but games like shogi. This exam wouldn't just be up to the ability of the students, but the contributions to the commander too. Everyone had a role to play, and you could say the commander was the most important. Commanders will get private points when a class emerges from victory, but at the same time will be punished by expulsion if the class is to lose. Once again, Class C was in a position where they had to nominate someone to take the heat. The class were looking at one man, that being Kiyotaka. The main reason for this was due to the protection point he got from the provisional exam. A point that, well, can protect you from getting expelled. Therefore, appointing Kiyotaka as the commander, they will be able to avoid anyone else from getting expelled from Class C. Now the question is, would Class C put Kiyotaka as the commander just to avoid the risk of someone getting expelled? Or would they rather appoint an excellent student like Hirata who can lead the class to victory? Hirata chose to speak up, saying how their opponent would be decided, to where Sensei replied saying after each class picks their commander, they will meet at the multi-purpose room after school. During this, there will be a raffle where the commander of one class is given an option of who to face, meaning that after the first pick, the two other classes will automatically be matched up against each other. Sensei urges Class C to pick an opponent before the end of the day, but Sensei mentions going against a lower ranking class isn't the best decision, implying that all the other 3 classes will try and go against them. Now within this exam, it is good to know what class is best suited to be your opponent, and this is because it is important to leverage strengths and weaknesses of each of the other classes. This means going up against Class A or B wouldn't exactly mean a loss. They could have a good chance of winning as long as they pick the events in their favor. No one in the class was smiling. Even Hirata was thinking if they could beat Class A or B. Sharpshooter broke the silence and said if they were to go against Class D and lose, they would automatically get thrown back to the bottom yet again. Then he began to write down the class standings as March 1st on the blackboard. Class A, 1001 points. Class B, 640 points. Class C, 377 points. And Class D, 318 points. Showing Class C and D were neck and neck. They may have managed to reach Class C, but if they were to lose again, then there will be Class D once more. Class C had no choice. They had to keep this position no matter what. Sensei went to explain that every event will increase class points by 30 from a win and decrease by 30 in a loss. Furthermore, the class that wins the whole exam will be granted 100 points as a reward. So the maximum points you can earn in this exam was a total of 310 class points, which is insane, but also scary because you could lose a ton too. Depending on the match, this could make Class C become B or even drop down to D once again. But if your opponent doesn't have enough class points, the score will temporarily make up the difference and provide them with missing points. To put it simply, the class points will be 0 for that class. This was fine, as no class had under 210 points. The whole situation can only really be described as stressful. The whole of the first year was probably feeling the same. All these emotions and thoughts must be crushing them, especially after the class vote. Class C needs to think about this hard, and really need to find a solution on what to do. Sensei leaves the class as the students are all crowded around the handout. Hirata squeezes through and takes pics of it, and even says to Kiyotaka that she will show him even though he may not be interested. She texted him the 2 pictures right after. Like stated before, the event should be simple and not obscure, but also have some other details. That being, commanders will be able to operate from a multi-purpose room, and school facilities such as the music room, science lab, gymnasium were all free to use. But there were some exceptions. There were also some event and time restrictions, that being for each class events that seemed to be duplicates, which will not be accepted. It was also stated that it was possible to have events that had no time limit. As for the number of participants, the sheet stated that a number needed for the 10 proposed events must be different, excluding those who will be substitutes. The minimum number for event is 1 and the max is 20. The class is restricted for adding 2 events that require more than 10 participants from a single class, including those as acting as substitutes. The conditions of participation. Each student may participate in 1 event and no more than that. If every student from a class has participated in an event, then students from that class will be allowed to participate in more. Now the role of the commander. Commanders have the right to be involved in all 7 events. The way they will be involved will be chosen by the class, but these methods must be approved by the school before being accepted. This exam is roughly divided into these 5 categories. There are many mixed thoughts on this exam, such as if they could come up with events to include so many people, and if it was possible to get everyone to participate in an event at least once. This could be bad, as we wouldn't be able to let anyone participate a second time if this happens. Hirata understanding shows a face of discontent. Kiyotaka speaks to her, acknowledging that she has complaints about the exam. Hirata confirms this, saying she has many, and the biggest one being that the class with more of their events chosen will hold the key to victory. The only events Class A would be confident in are the ones they choose. Hirata states it would be more fair if the school were to select 10 events to present them to each class, randomly choosing 7 for the day. Kiyotaka thinks if they judge the school based on fairness, then she would be correct. But goddamn, when has this school ever been fair? They've been expelling students left, right, and center. He claims to Hirata that if they were to do it, then the lower ranked classes will have even lower chances than winning. They should interpret this as the school being merciful. Well, it's kind of wild how even having low chances is considered merciful at this school. But it's better than nothing. This allows classes like CE having the chance to go up against B or A, due to them being able to select events they know they are good at and are able to win. All the students focusing, coming together, there was one man sat at his desk, motionless, as his eyes deeped into the abyss, just waiting for time to tick away. No, not Ike. But actually, Hirata. After the class vote, Hirata was left a broken man, and just became an empty shell, full of nothing but depression. Being the center of Class C, the lost angel. All of a sudden, Pseudo spoke, asking how Kiyotaka got so many praise votes in the class exam. A total of 42 to be exact. Saying that, all eyes began to lay upon Kiyotaka. Hirata took initiative and spoke up on what happened, but Pseudo wanted to hear it from him. Hirata added that he doesn't even know, playing dumb, to which he explained saying it was all part of Sakyanagi's plan. She stated that Yamauchi was targeted by her, and she got students from behind the scenes to give Kiyotaka points. Pseudo asked why she would do such a thing, to where he even thinks Kiyotaka may be super incredible, therefore worthy of praise votes. Funny thing is, Pseudo saying the most random shit happens to be right for once. Hirata adds Kiyotaka has never done anything special, and he's just a student who's quick on his feet, referencing Volume 5 in the race against Manabu. Pseudo, still confused, thinks there still must be a reason for him getting so many praise votes. This causes Hirata to explain that if Kiyotaka really was a talented person, then why would they save him? Better yet, why would an enemy like Sakyanagi save him? Kei and Sakura go to agree with Hirata, followed by many other boys within the class. That's my girl, Kei. Speaking up for her daddy. Hirata adds that she doesn't know why Sakyanagi would go after Yamauchi, but we all know. Go back to Volume 8, where he bumps into her and she falls on the floor. Yes, she really went that petty and got rid of the boy just because she fell over. Lesson learned. The fuck was Sakyanagi? After all this, Pseudo and Ike should trust this, but he still hasn't come to terms with it. She asks if he was upset for standing up for Kiyotaka, to where Pseudo looks away and not even giving a response. Pseudo jelly. Ooh. Hirata explains that she stood up for Kiyotaka because she is the one most responsible for Yamauchi's expulsion. What was true, the one who exposed Yamauchi's schemes to the whole class was none other than Hirata herself. Hirata says to Pseudo if he has someone to blame, then blame her. But of course, Pseudo couldn't do this. He knew deep down inside the fucked up reality they now live in. The reality of students being inevitably disregarded and cast away. A hard pill to swallow, but one that had to be done. The main reason for this frustration comes from Kiyotaka being the one who ended up with a protection point. Kiyotaka being the only one who watches the exam and sits from the sidelines. Suddenly Kiyotaka even speaks up, saying why doesn't he become the commander? He hadn't heard anything from Sakyanagi, but he knew she would 100% be commander for Class A. Kiyotaka had to do this because he made a promise to her at the end of Volume 10, saying he would face off in the last exam, and he had to see it through. He explained to the class that he would clear up all the suspicions of what happened during the class vote by being the scapegoat this time around. Ayanokoji? Suda said, as he looked at him a little bit surprised. Some thrilled about this idea that Kiyotaka would be able to clear his name and no one will have to be expelled in the process. But there was one who didn't approve, that being Sino Hara. She stated that it was good that they don't have to say goodbye to anyone. But by making Kiyotaka the commander, it stops all their chances from winning at the get-go. She states that Hirata should be the one to take the commander spot, as Kiyotaka is just average. Painful truth, well, at least the one that's known to the public. She states that if they were to go against Class A or B, having Kiyotaka as commander would only be bad, and they would drop down to Class D once more. So as some students started to agree, she asked if anyone would be interested, and is met with a room full of crickets. Nobody wanted to raise their hand. If it were a few days ago, maybe they could have relied on Hirata, but they didn't have that choice this time. Even in this situation, when the whole class was involved, he did nothing but put his head down not taking part. Everyone turned to Hirata, but she stated she doesn't want to take the risk either, saying she wants to enjoy some of the benefits as the rest of the class. But Shinohara was right. There's no guarantee that we could either beat Class A or B. If they were to go up against them at their current level, it might not end too well. But you were just covering for Ayanokoji a few seconds ago. Now you want to have him as commander? It was Kei speaking up against Hirata, calling out on her inconsistency. Hirata responded saying that she thought he may choose to volunteer if I spared him the effort of providing he had nothing to do with Yamauchi's expulsion, blocking off Kiyotaka's potential escape routes in the process. It was like Hirata had been aiming to pass responsibilities of the commander to Kiyotaka, just like he expected. She stated that even if Kiyotaka was the commander, they can make preparations for everything ahead of time, as long as he acts instructed on the day of the exam, really showing it doesn't matter who the commander is. Met with voices of agreement by the ones who didn't think that deeply about it. For now, it was Hirata taking the lead on the class as the one who had done Hirata was surrounded in nothing but darkness. Quite a beefy chapter I might add, and a really hard one to say, I'm not gonna lie, some of the words I used were a little bit too big for your boy. And the explanation of the final exam just overall a huge one, and a culmination of everything the students have done in the first year. Stressful and important for the future of the series. Now, let's continue. Come lunch break on the same day, almost every student have agreed to meet up in the class. The students who didn't bring their lunch went to go grab some food, and they were instructed to immediately come back to the class. Kiyotaka being one of these students, he left the classroom and began to contact people in an isolated location. The first he was able to reach immediately, as he just sent them a message beforehand. That couldn't be said for the other person though. First being Konji, the Giga Chad himself, who couldn't be tamed by anyone. Another student was Hirata. Besides from that, everyone was here. A few voices began to arise from the class, those expressing their concerns of Hirata not coming. So probably thought that Konji would begin to take things seriously. But Kiyotaka thought luck wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, another exam that the class vote will happen again, and Konji would have to pay the price. Hirata asked class if they're unsure on anything, then to ask her about it while they're eating. Really taking a role as the leader of Class C after Hirata left the main stage. Some time passes, and Chabashiro instructs the commander to go out in the hallway as soon as possible. Hirata being the first to get up. The events we'll be discussing was one of the girls, rushing up to him, trying to call out, but sadly her words didn't get through to him. I'm going to the bathroom, be right back. The one saying this was Mei Yu Wang. Assume that everybody called me-chan. Again, and there's no way I would start saying Mei Yu Wang. Bro, this is impossible to pronounce all the time, just for me at least, that's my opinion. I love in the series how there's still characters I don't know, and to this day, it's pretty cool. I love learning about all of them, well, besides Ike. Fuck Ike. Kiyotaka says he only thinks to Hirata as he needs to go tend to his duties as commander. Hirata replies saying head to the multi-purpose room and decide on the class that we go up against, and if given the option, to choose class D. As he leaves, Kiyotaka says he knows, but not to expect much out of him. Kiyotaka walks into the hallway, is met by words by Chabashiro, asking who the hell the commander is, saying this of course because 3 students just ran out of the class. It's me. I'm the commander. Oh? She says. With that, the two of them head to the special building. Kiyotaka adds that the special building is a little bit far considering all they're doing is picking their opponents. Sensei adds that not only will they pick their opponents, but it will be explained how things are managed throughout the exam. She adds he went through so much trouble to get a protection point only to be forced to become the commander, teasing him, calling him unlucky. To which Kiyotaka says he wasn't forced but volunteered for the position himself. All of a sudden Sensei stopped for a second. There was a slight pause. You did? Is there something wrong with that? I thought you hated unnecessary attention, she questioned. The only difference was whether or not they forced me into it, Kiyotaka adds. Kiyotaka had a thought. It was whoever won the protection point, they would most likely become the commander. And if they refused, they would only be safe on 1 expulsion. Whatever happened, by becoming the commander, you've taken a huge responsibility. If you cut any corners, Class C would be the one to pay. As there was no one around, she spoke boldly. The way Kiyotaka adds, are you threatening me? Turning, seeing the slight grin on her face. It's almost like volume 7, like pre-volume 7 where Sensei had like this grip on Kiyotaka, but it's a little bit different this time. I think Sensei knows she may have realized her dream of reaching Class A might be a little bit possible with this. She says he is free to think what he wants, but she's definitely looking forward to it, as she is able to see what he's really made of. There's no guarantee I'll win, adds Kiyotaka. Is that so? Sorry, but I for one can't imagine you possibly losing, she replies. Really just showing how much he really believes in Kiyotaka and trusts his abilities to win this. They arrive in a multi-purpose room, and the other 3 seem to be there. The other 3 commanders, Class D Kanda, Class B Ichinose, and Class A, just as Kiyotaka thought, Sakyanagi. Now in this room there were 2 computers, set up directly opposite to each other, connected to a large monitor. Master Sensei presented them with a lottery box, as they were to draw a slip to see what student their class would face. Ichinose then drew first, followed by the others. Since the slips were unfolded, they knew the results right away. It was Class D's Kanda who drew the winning slip. He had the right to choose who to face. Sakyanagi states that she wanted to avoid all confrontation with Class B, a response she couldn't tell was polite or her real intentions. Mashima then asked Kanda who he wanted to face. He says he doesn't want to hesitate and wants to face off against Class B. An opponent completely unexpected from this. He was asked by Mashima if he really wants to choose Class B, to where he confirms. And just like that, the matches are final. Class B versus Class D, and Class A versus Class C. Baby, we're gonna get a good one up in here. Sakyanagi questions Kanda's reasoning on this, to where he replied that the way things are now, they need to take much more points from the upper classes as possible, therefore they chose Class B. Also, as they wanted to avoid fighting Class A for the time being. What really makes sense, if they went for Class C then the points aren't much of a difference, but going for Class A might have been risky. But Class B, oh, Class B was just perfect. Sakyanagi gives Kanda a slight bow and wishes Class D the best of luck. Kiyotaka mentioned trickery in his head. He contacted Ichinose and Ishizaki before school had ended, telling them how he wants to face off against Class A. Ichinose was generally interested in facing Class A, but ultimately opted out as she owed Kiyotaka a favor. For Ishizaki and Class D, they were already planning on facing Class B. The only problem was if Kiyotaka had won the draw. He would have had to come up with a good excuse as Hirata told him to choose Class D. But the probability winning against 3 classes was low, so it was pretty fine. He also mentioned that Sakyanagi must have been aware that Kiyotaka had something to do with this prior to the meeting. Now, with all that done, the teachers went on to explain how the commander system will work. We'll be done using a computer room where they'll be inciting classmates in real time. For example, before the event starts, there'll be a catalog of students on the screen, which the commander will drag a portrait of that student onto the box they are participating in. If you make a mistake or reconsider, you can drag and drop the photo outside the box and reselect. Hoshinomiya-sensei and Ichinose gave ideas relating this to a video game. Some more information being that there will be a time limit on the screen selecting participants for the exam. If there are more students for the event, then the time given will also be more. 30 seconds per person. Pretty fair time limit, I have to say so myself. If you are to select too many students or none at all, then they will be filled out with random. Once the event begins, it will be shown live on a large monitor in front of the commander. For example, like shogi, stock footage will be shown on the screen just like TV, and the rules where the commander can participate will be listed on the screen after the event has started. As the commander, you can do a lot of things, even intervene and pause the game to redo a move. You'll be able to give classmate direct vocal instructions, but the school has opted to use the text for speech, which will allow the system to read out messages as you type them. Kiyotaka thought this was probably done so the amount of information they convey doesn't go over the line. The explanation continues. If the commanders step out of line, meaning break the rules, the class may be faced with a DQ or even lose that event. Even Kiyotaka now realizes that he may have had more on his plate than he initially thought. To which I agree, I thought the role of the commander would just be assigning students, but like with this, it's like he controls the whole exam itself. Who's being placed in it, who's doing what, and even controlling some of the moves. It's like the whole of Class C is on the back of Kiyotaka. I mean, it usually is anyway, but let's not bring that up. And hey, if that's the case, I've got to say, they're one lucky bunch. That pretty much wraps up the exam explanations. With no questions, Mashima-sensei wraps this up and they leave. Before Kiyotaka went back to his dorm, he had a lot of thoughts. He understood he would only be able to fight confined in the scope of his classmates' abilities. Compared them to the legendary strategists like Sun Tzu, commanding an army of children saying they wouldn't be able to stand a chance against adults. All is wild because Kiyotaka's full abilities are even unknown to us, and he pretty much has to command people on a much lower scale than him. He can't help but think how to approach this. Kiyotaka knew he had to contact the one person who knew the class as if it was the back of their head. There were three of them: Kushida, Hirata, and Kei. Both Kushida and Hirata had been infected by the class vote, therefore the only option there had to be Kei. Some time passes and Kei comes to Kiyotaka's room, to which Kei replied saying unlike him, she has a ton of friends and besides, she's the star of today. A choice of words which were alluding to something. Star? Why? Questioned Kiyotaka, as Kei looked away with a slightly irritated look on her face. I really love these two, like honestly. Kei thought it would be bad if they were seen publicly together, but Kiyotaka states that he wouldn't mind, giving Kei some peace of mind. And besides, Kiyotaka is the commander, so being with a public figure of Class C at this time doesn't seem out of the ordinary. Kiyotaka asked Kei about the internal state of the class, and reaching out to Hirata is impossible. It was like he has given up entirely. She was worried about him. Went down the class roster and Kiyotaka began to memorize all the info within the girls of Class C. In just 10 minutes, Kiyotaka memorized it all. Kei gave Kiyotaka sarcastic praise, teasing him a little bit. She knew it would be hard to go against Class A and tried to get some words out. The words were stuck in her throat. She couldn't get them out. She would ask Kiyotaka if it was possible to make it that she wouldn't participate. To which he replies saying he doesn't get to decide this, and depending on what Class A does, she may have to participate twice. Shaking her head frantically, emphasizing that she didn't want to be forced. Yeah, it's so cute though. Like honestly, I really can't wait for this scene to get animated, or I just want like a KOVA. Like I'll die happy, man. She looked at Kiyotaka, giving him a thumbs up, saying, "If it's you, Kiyotaka, I know you could beat Sakyanagi-san." But not even Kei could grasp the full extent of what Kiyotaka could really do. Kei asked if this is all he wanted to say, and pouted. It was like the look in her eyes was saying they could have done this over the phone. Kiyotaka replied to this saying some things are easier to convey in person, will cause Kei's expression to stiffen further. This really wasn't the response she wanted to hear. Sounds like we're done. I'll be leaving. Kei? Oh god, Kei's annoyed. Like Kiyotaka can tell too. I'll contact you again if something important comes up. Sure. Whatever. It was like Kei was expecting something the whole time, but now given up. She was stubborn and didn't want to go to the topic herself. Kiyotaka then took the lead and stopped her. He said he still had something to say and walked over to his drawer. Before she had come, Kiyotaka stashed something away in his drawer so she wouldn't notice. What is it? If you had something to say, you should have said it earlier, Kei yelled. It's just, today's your birthday, isn't it? Eh? Seriously, you knew? This man Kiyotaka not only knew, but wanted to tease Kei a little bit, saying he had something shipped and wrapped up for Kei's birthday. Kei annoyed Ted to stop doing stuff like that, and if he wanted to give her a present, he should have done it earlier. She went to add that this best be worth it. As Kiyotaka went to hand over the present, Kei was unwilling to look him that high. Seeing this, he stopped and asked her if she was really looking forward to this. No, not really, Kei stuttered. To which Kiyotaka says he could always take it back. What? Kei yelled, saying you can't change your mind after deciding to give something to someone. Her response was impossible to understand. A true Sun-san, I must add. Kei grabbed the box out of Kiyotaka's hand. It was a tiny square box, but didn't weigh much. Kei was sus, and even asked if there was anything in it. To where Kiyotaka says he wouldn't have the courage to give her an empty box. even imagining how angry she would get if he did something like that. And I suppose you wouldn't mind if I take a look at that, like a police officer. She began to check the contents of the box. Even it was a single piece of metal, sparkled with a bright gold shine. Get out of it, this is too much, implying that people who are just friends don't give this to each other. Kiyotaka, of course, being confused with the statement, tilted his head. Kiyotaka then thought the present he chose wasn't very good. She seemed unhappy with the shape. Face was turning red as she voiced her dissatisfaction. Kiyotaka said anyone would feel hurt hearing this, including him. She asked if it was expensive, to where Kiyotaka said it wasn't cheap, saying it costed 20,000 yen. Kei asked if she got rid of him before. Why Kiyotaka went out of his way to get something so expensive. He replied honestly, saying he had never gotten a birthday present for a girl before. So he did some research and came across a website where they recommended a necklace as the #1 thing to get a girl for their birthday. Good lord, was the only thing Kei could reply, and cringed at Kiyotaka. Poor man, it's just so cheesy, but at the same time it's so cute. You really can't help the two really being made for each other at this point. She added he's so smart but an idiot when it comes to this stuff. She rates the gift 10 out of 100 points. Kiyotaka had a lot to learn about girls. Also, a box of desserts would have been good, to where Kei replied saying that would have been 15 out of 100 points. My boy really spent all of his money, but he could have just got a box of chocolates from the dollar store and it would have been better than this, huh? Kiyotaka advised she can leave it here and he'll get a cake box in a few days instead, offering her an alternative, deeply regretting his lack of research. I feel so bad of Kiyotaka because we all know Kei loves this present, but she's just so shy about it. And Kiyotaka's never dealt with chicks in his life, so of course he's a dumbass when it comes to this aspect. But it's so wholesome to see he actually cares and really wants to buy her something, as, you know, he feels bad he did crap research on it, but it's dope. Awesome, I love these two. Kei stared at her necklace for a moment and turned to him. After what was said, she put the necklace around her neck. She said the heart was a bit childish, but since she has such a sexy hot body, anything will look nice on her. Yeah, she ain't wrong though, she ain't wrong. Kiyotaka looked at her and the only thing he could wonder was what was coming out of a first-year student's mouth. Kei checked herself out on every angle before nodding in satisfaction. True model she is, I might add, huh? She says she'll be nice and accept it this once, as it's Kiyotaka's first time giving a present to a girl. With that, we end the chapter, and it was pretty wholesome. Of course, we had the start where we got information on the commanders and really found out all the matchups. But this really stole the spotlight for me. Well, whenever Kei's in a scene that already steals the spotlight for me, I turn all my attention towards it, giggling like a little schoolgirl a little bit. These two didn't get married, y'all. Like, that's all I'm saying. Like, I love these two too much, but like, this is my #1 couple in the anime Japanese series, as you could, whatever you want to say. This is my #1 couple, even though they're not, you know, dating. So a bit of a shame, but you know, I shipped them. That's what I really try to say. The day after the class matchup was decided, Class C yet again arranged for another class-wide discussion once school was out for the day. For lunch, they were free to do what they wanted. As normal, the Ayanokoji group met up as usual and ate. They talked about how things were in the class, and even Kiyotaka asked what happened when he left for the commander meeting. They added that the one meet at lunch yesterday wasn't enough for everyone to get a full grasp of the rules. I bet it was that motherfucker Ike, huh? I know it was that motherfucker Ike, huh? It was mentioned that they were being spied on by other classes. They talked a little bit how they would go against Class A for a little longer. A little time passes, and they turn their attention to Hirata, who just walks in. Haruka mutters saying he looks seriously ill or something. They know that there is nothing they can do to help him. After school, the bell rings and Hirata is the first one to leave. Several girls raise their voices to get his attention. Amongst those girls is Michan. She asks him to wait, but stopped by Hirata, who asked them to wait, saying there was nothing they can do for him, and they should just return to their seats. To everyone's surprise, Hirata was gone, but Konji was here. He laughed and said he was a part of the class too, and of course he's here. But I guess after no surprise, he left right after. Like, he had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Hirata managed to stop Konji to where he sat down with a broad smile on his face and seemed to hear her out. He agreed to participate this one time. Hirata tells the class to suggest anything they have in mind. Hirata has a lot of pressure and is stressed by telling the class they don't have to worry. Now I feel bad because, like, if Kushida and Hirata were fine, it would be a lot easier for Hirata, but since they are pretty much broken now, all the pressure has really gone on Hirata's shoulders and you really can't help but feel for her. Konji then spoke up, pretty much saying he's the best and he could win at any event. They knew ordinary methods wouldn't work with him. This also raises a question I have, and Kiyotaka has this one too. Something to do with Konji's abilities. Kiyotaka questions if he could beat Sudo in a basketball game. Well, I think he could. I feel Konji is the real anomaly of the class. Sure, you have someone who's Kiyotaka is super talented, but he's the main character. But I feel like a character was sort of an anomaly just within that is Konji. Someone who's left out the class, someone who doesn't really care about anyone else in this class. I can almost relate him to Kiyotaka a little bit. But who knows? Still mystery. The next day, Hirata tells Kiyotaka that she won't include Hirata as an asset in his exam. They don't know when or if he will recover. Hirata was relieved that he didn't nominate himself as the commander just to lose on purpose and get expelled. That would have actually been wild to see, in my opinion, if Hirata was actually the one who said, "Hey, I'm fucking done with you guys. I don't want to give anything at the school anymore." He's the commander and does some crazy shit. And yeah, we would have gotten a really crazy future in that exam, I think. She says to Kiyotaka must have been rough for him taking a role as the commander. But he just says as that's up to her, as she is covering for him. She glared at him, even asking if he could beat Sakyanagi with that attitude. Asking him to get more involved for that to happen. But Kiyotaka then asked her to imagine him getting involved with the class, strategizing events. Rikta's face didn't tighten, saying she couldn't imagine it, to the point where even the idea was terrifying. You see, to the rest of the class, Kiyotaka was just a shadow. Even being the commander, this very fact won't change. If he was to start giving off instructions, then it wouldn't really end well. Kiyotaka thought he would just take an active role using the strategy Hirata comes up with. Suddenly, Hirata walks in, and the atmosphere of the classroom began to change. Michan then says good morning, but to her avail, she gets ignored. On top of that, it was really late to school. Hirata notices Michan's compassion towards Hirata, worrying about him and even the idea being brought up that it could be love. She crosses her arms and shakes her head. She couldn't understand. She hopes for Michan to forget, even think of a way to make her give up. Michan goes up to Hirata trying to start a conversation. This time Hirata actually speaks, asking Michan to leave him alone already. These words just echoing around the class. Rejecting her, he adds it's annoying. Nothing but cold emotion in his voice. Hirata was not the same. You could see he was a changed man. If that wasn't worse enough, Michan said she just wanted to eat with him, where Hirata says, I'm not eating. Not with you. Jesus Christ. If a rejection couldn't be more clear, he just killed this woman with words. He didn't say it to me, but I felt that. Like, goddamn. Kei gets up saying, Yosuke-kun, isn't that going a bit too far? But Hirata then claps back, saying they have nothing to do with each other anymore, and to stop calling him by his given name so intimately. She agrees, and says he still went too far with Michan, but Hirata still wasn't done. Compared to how Kei talks to others and says there isn't much of a difference. This man Hirata does not give a fuck, bro. He woke up this morning and put on the black Air Force as he came to school. What? For the sake of the class, She was cut off by Hirata. And if she doesn't, she will know the consequences. Implying that if she says anything else, he will expose everything about her. Hirata is really, like, just a menace now. Like I said, the Black Air Force energy is thriving off this man. He's acting like a savage and something we've never seen before. This is character development in the worst way. God damn. Kei sits down and a gloomy mood began to sweep in the class once again. But there was one student who clearly wasn't affected by this. That being Konji. He made just one comment. Why must so many problem children be in my class? Kiyotaka wanted to say that's what he thought about him, but he held himself back. Damn, even Kiyotaka was starting to be a savage. Like, what the hell? It was time for the class discussion again. And just like before, Hirata stood up immediately and left the classroom. This time, Michan would sit quietly, watching him leave. Rejection from earlier probably left a mark on her. As she tried to get up, she was stopped in her tracks. She couldn't move. Eventually, her legs gave in, and she sat back down. Kushida would then ask Michan if she wanted to go home together after the discussion. She wouldn't be the type to leave a friend in need. If Kushida couldn't save Hirata, and she could at least save Michan. A little later, Michan got up saying she had something to do, that being to chase after Hirata once again. I gotta give her credit, like after being smoked, and I mean like smoked in front of the whole class, she's still getting up and chasing after Hirata, so like, I gotta give her credit for that. Hirata tries to stop her, saying he is useless and broken right now, but she replies saying she doesn't want to abandon him. Not listening, she leaves the class, followed by Hirata leaving to bring her back. Even though Hirata said for everyone to wait here, Kiyotaka got up to chase her. He got up to Hirata, saying the person who thinks leaving Hirata alone probably shouldn't be the one to chase after him. They said they would talk later and Kiyotaka says he will go. Soon after walking, he bumped into Hashimoto. What doesn't seem to be a coincidence. He may have even heard the conversation with Hirata just now. He gave a hello to Kiyotaka and even pointed in the direction where Michan ran away. Kiyotaka gave a light nod and proceeded to chase after Michan. After leaving the building, Kiyotaka managed to find Michan and they saw Hirata heading back to the dorms. He then asked Michan if he was going to call out to him, but Michan said she was too imitated by him. I don't blame her for that, to be fair. Like, come on, like, she got smoked in front of the whole class. Like, goddamn. She says she didn't want to leave Hirata on his own and wants to make him feel like he's not alone, even if he ends up hating her. Am I making a mistake? She asked Kiyotaka. No, you're right. Kiyotaka replies, thinking that if they were to leave Hirata alone, then it wouldn't make the situation any better either. Michan gets the push she needs and chases after Hirata. On the way back to Class C, Kiyotaka bumps into Hashimoto yet again. They talk a little. He asks if Hashimoto managed to steal any information, but he says he couldn't. Hashimoto then gives Kiyotaka a hard time, saying things like it's hard to get everyone working together, and asking if he became the commander just because of his protection point. Kiyotaka says they're up against Class A, so there was no other choice on the start. Hashimoto, not convinced, walks away but gives a light pat on his shoulder before leaving. Kiyotaka is back. He sees the class talking about different events, from basketball to even English, discussing what students would be good for this. After an hour of discussion, Hirata gathers up all this information. She's probably going to focus on one-on-one meetings from now on, rather than a whole class discussion. Thursday morning, Kiyotaka is on his way to school but is met by a cheerful, energetic voice behind him. It's Hoshinomiya-sensei. She asks him to wait up and grabs a hold of Kiyotaka's hand. I wonder what type of female teacher would do this with a male student. Kiyotaka pulls his hand away from her and her face lights up saying, at least you got a girlfriend. Kiyotaka says nope, and he wouldn't be able to. So him and Sensei have a talk. She says it was a waste of a perfect environment. Kiyotaka plays dumb, or just is dumb with his girl talk, I can't blame him. And they talk about the sharing room system what was abolished long ago. She says there aren't many relationships, to where Kiyotaka wanted to say that she shouldn't judge him for being single, but thought it wouldn't make any difference if he was to say this. They talk about couples, and if they were to be in separate classes it would be hard. Boshinome Sensei says this would be great, as there would be drama and conflict, making it better. At this point they're interrupted by Chabashira, who asks what they were talking about. Boshinome says to not look at her with such a scary look, to where Chabashira says Kiyotaka is her student. Boshinome mentions that Chabashira seems to care about Kiyotaka a fair bit, and says they'll be able to find out what he really is capable of due to the exam. She says there's no need to force herself to get involved, and just like usual, the two bicker. I'm not saying the first bit of this chapter is irrelevant, but again, this volume has 400 plus pages, and your boy can only cover so much while keeping his sanity, especially writing the script. Like, this almost broke me. Like, I've finished now recording, but this almost broke me to record. This was horrible to write, but it's okay. I had fun with it. So basically in this part we have Ayanokoji group heading to the CAF, but they're actually joined by Ichinose. They talk about the special exam and how Class D was targeting Class B. Even Keisei states that Class C is being spied on by Class A. They go back and forth talking about Class D and even talking about conflicts. The talk ends with Kiyotaka making eye contact for the first and only time with Ichinose. In this exchange she brushes a strand of her hair from her face and a citrus scent tickles down Kiyotaka's nose. Ayanokoji group talk about Ichinose wearing perfume. Ichinose is head over heels over Kiyotaka, huh? We move on a little, and like usual, Michan again is chasing after Hirata. But Kiyotaka runs into Kushida. She hasn't really done anything to help the class, nor interfering with them. The days were just going by with her saying nothing. After the class vote, her position in the class was unstable, as she was exposed for wanting to get Kiyotaka expelled with Yamauchi. The whole affair ended up leaving a stain on her persona. On top of that, Hirata is the one leading the class, one who knows her secrets of her past, and giving her a scolding before the end of the class vote. This must have damaged Kushida's pride immensely, which I think is an understatement. She must be fucking furious right now. No matter how you look at it, Kushida's smiling, cheerful mask really can't uncover her true feelings. And hell, you wouldn't want to know the real beast laying in dormant beneath that very mask. The two take a walk and talk about how she's not doing anything because of the class vote aftermath. She wanted to reassure Kiyotaka that the only reason she's not helping isn't because of Hirata, but something different. Kushida emphasizes this many times, even Kiyotaka nodding, but he doesn't even buy it. She asks a question suddenly. How do I look to you right now? Ayanokoji-kun? Be honest with me. Oh, Kiyotaka says. He thinks to the normal eye she's just a classmate with a nice smile on her face. But Kiyotaka thought differently this time. He wanted to imagine Kushida's personality under this mask. A dark thought then came to his head. I'm definitely going to fuck up that bitch. She dared to make a fool of me in front of the entire class. I'll never forgive her. I'll kill her. Kill her. Kill her. Kill her. I'll definitely kill her. With a vein popping out of the side of her head, Kiyotaka imagined this while she talked about Hirata. He couldn't find the words to express what he just imagined. You just thought of something incredibly rude right now, didn't you? I think that's an understatement of what Kiyotaka just thought. This man really thought the wildest shit, but I gotta say, it's probably accurate. Kushida is really scary, and so scary, I feel like not being able to depict her real emotions makes it even more scary. She could be wanting to kill you, but have a smile on her face at all times. All I can say is I'm happy I'm not in a class with Kushida. And because of people like her, it makes me sus when someone acts too nice. That's just me though. Kiyotaka knew what he just thought was a little bit too extreme, so they got to the chase, and Kiyotaka talked about who he can rely on now. He said nobody could compare to her. So where Kushida was happy, she said she got all sorts of things on her plate right now, alluding to the shattered reputation of hers, and how it really impacted her. Just imagine a fake persona you built up for an entire year has now been distorted. For Kushida, it's a lot harder. It's almost like she has to go back to the drawing board and figure out new things for this character, almost like an author. Time passes and Kushida leaves, walking towards the mall, not stopping to look back once. The weekend has come and it is now White Day. Kiyotaka took the preparations to give gifts to those who gave him chocolate on Valentine's Day. He went out early in the morning to avoid being seen by anyone and approached the mailboxes to those respective people. As he was about to head back, he was seen by Ichinose, who acted like she saw something she shouldn't. She said good morning, and just like before, she avoided eye contact with Kiyotaka. She stated that she just got back from a morning walk, but seemed to stare at something behind Kiyotaka. He moved out the way and checked on mailbox, and she thanked him with a nod. Kiyotaka said it was a return gift for Valentine's Day. Ichinose had frozen, saying he didn't have to. Thank you, I'm sorry, I'm not really used to this kind of thing, so I'm kind of nervous. Damn, K might have some competition. I love her, but like, Ichinose is hella cute too. They again talked about Class D and harassment. Ichinose says she would investigate more on Monday. She asked Kiyotaka what he's going to do about the duties of commander, and he said he would leave it to Hirata, just like the events. To where Kiyotaka says, He's only close to a few of his classmates, implying that it's best if Hirata handles this. I totally didn't prepare for this. As the conversation ended, Ichinose uttered those words and began to twirl a strand of her hair with her index finger. Prepare? Kiyotaka questioned. To which Ichinose told him not to worry. Kiyotaka's such a dummy, like, it's not even his fault. Like, he was raised in an environment where there wasn't really chicks doing, like, and on there, like, you know, stuff like that. So, I don't blame him at all, but, like, how he has all these cute girls around him, but he's so dumb when it comes to this, but, you know, you can't help but not like Kyo. As they stepped out the elevator, he locked eyes with Ichinose for a brief second. It caught her off guard. What? I see you. She panicked, began to mash the close button several times before the door closed. She's so cute, though, like, come on. The author has really hit a 10 out of 10 with all the girls and their purpose. If he wants them to be cute, then they're cute. Like, unlike Kushida. When Kushida's cute, she is kind of cute. But, like, she's like the devil. But all the other girls, like, goddamn. Monday morning then came. But first of all, I gotta say, we are speeding through the fucking days in this volume, huh? Like, Jesus Christ. On the way to school, Kiyotaka ran into Manabu and Tachibana. It didn't seem like they were waiting for him, but it was just a coincidence. Tachibana then distanced herself without saying anything, which is probably a way of her being polite, showing she wouldn't get into conversation. Special exam going well? Manabu had asked the Kiyotaka. He then thought to himself. The special thing about Manabu was even though he hadn't gotten an in-depth explanation, he already had a grasp of the situation. Kiyotaka replied saying that should be his question, asking if he can even graduate as a member of Class A. Manabu then stated they won't be able to tell till next week's results. You couldn't tell if he was worried or perfectly fine. His face just wouldn't tell the story. Kiyotaka added that on his end, Hirata was working hard, and even asked if the third year should be on break at this point. Manabu mentions higher education and told Kiyotaka he wouldn't be aware of it yet, showing the third years would be going through some troubling things at this moment. Higher education? Finding a job even though it hasn't been decided to be graduating as a member of Class A yet? Questioned Kiyotaka. You'll understand eventually, said Manabu, almost like there were things he couldn't say to him yet. Kiyotaka will not know these things until he gets to the third year. Manabu stated that Kiyotaka could ask any questions as long as it's in the scope of what he's allowed to answer. That scope being really narrow in Kiyotaka's eyes. He knew Manabu had to be careful about answering questions about the school as a whole. He wanted to ask Manabu about something, that being Hirata. Kiyotaka mentioned Hirata as an excellent person, both in physical and academic sense. And while she may not be on the same level as him, she's not bad enough for you to denounce her and drive her out the school. He carried on and said Suzune and you are 2 years apart, and you haven't seen growth in these 2 years? With the system the school has in place, you should have seen at first glance how much he's grown up. Manabu understood and thought it was natural that Kiyotaka was curious about this. He mentioned he wasn't disappointed with Suzune because of her grades, or the class she was in. It was because of her maturity. You see, Suzune has changed dramatically from the way she used to be. From a child who used to smile all the time to a whole new personality, almost imitating Manabu. Kiyotaka couldn't even imagine Suzune like this. Manabu went on to say it's a bad habit of hers. He tried to fix it by being cold to her, but as a result, it got worse and worse. She continued to chase after her brother's shadow, hence Horikta's personality as we see now. What's kind of crazy, like, I can't even think of Horikta smiling all the time, as the person she is now is really cold and, like, you know, the sun, so smiling is a little bit out of character. Kiyotaka mentions that you're so perfect, but you can't communicate with your sister properly? There's no such thing as a perfect human. Am I wrong? Manabu knew from the very first time he saw Horikta, she was the same girl from 2 years ago, and he didn't even have to talk to her to know this. Horikta was almost obsessed with Manabu's every word, from studying, exercising, taking it even further, as copying his favorite foods, drinks, and the color of his clothes he wears. What the fuck? Horikta is the biggest brocon in fucking any series I've seen at this point. Like, the color of his clothes? That's kind of wild. I wouldn't be surprised if our room looked like this. Manabu then went to say anyone who knows what she was like would know that girl. Cut off mid-sentence and choked up on his words. Never mind, this is something I should keep a secret. Even from you. I'd like this to be the perfect metric to determine whether or not Suzune has really changed, stated Manabu. Showing Horikta still hasn't changed. She's starting to break away from her past, but is only halfway there. But if Manabu stopped walking for a moment, fixed his eyes on Kiyotaka. For some reason, Kiyotaka got caught up in this and stopped walking too. If Suzune could stop chasing after my shadow, break away from her dependency, and become honest with herself, she would surpass me altogether. Probably become someone you wouldn't be able to ignore. Manabu wasn't just saying this because he was her older brother. He was saying this because he truly meant it. Suddenly a thought came to Kiyotaka's mind. What was I supposed to be doing at this school? No, what did I want to be doing? It was like he finally found the answer to this question. But in the end, it all depends on whether she can make change at all. She will change, responded Kiyotaka. He said this with confidence, but corrected himself and said he's going to change her. Not the same way he's gone about it, but for real this time. Which is insane. Because when the Kiyotaka first got here, you know, he wanted to live a peaceful life. Now it's almost like he's gotten a new purpose, and every time he finds Manabu, he almost gets a new purpose. Like the 2 last missions he gave him. One to be stop Nagamo, and now to change Horikta. Like, it's crazy. Like, this is insane. We haven't really seen Kiyotaka like this before, And his character development is getting bigger and bigger within every volume. And finally, in the last volume, has something you can lean in towards year 2. Something insane, I really can't wait to see where this goes. Kiyotaka felt like this encounter with Manabu will leave a large impact on his life. But Kiyotaka wanted to ask one more thing before Manabu graduated. A complete personal question. Are you going out with Tachibana? I didn't know Kiyotaka would ask questions like this. Like, goddamn, a silly question. Even he knew, but decided to ask anyway. No, nothing of the sort. Denied instantly. My man didn't even hesitate. Poor Tachibana. But one quick glance at Tachibana's face told Kiyotaka that this was much more of a complicated relationship than he thought. There was no doubt that Tachibana had some sort of feelings for him. Manabu said for the last 3 years he's done nothing but think of school. For the better or for the worse. He didn't think such a question could come out of Kiyotaka's mouth and ask, "Are you just a regular high school student?" Kiyotaka thought he may have been influenced by the talk with Hoshinomiya sensei earlier. "I think I'm about as regular as you can get," mentioned Kiyotaka. "Ah, that's right. So, have you gotten yourself a girlfriend, Mr. Regular High School Student?" Just a funny little remark made by Manabu, which, to be honest, I really love the talks between these two. Whenever they talk, it's just so interesting, and you never know where it's gonna go. Kiyotaka said, he's single right now, but if the suitable person comes along, he's accepting applications. K.O.I. riot, K.O.I. riot, K.O.I. riot. I feel like I could rest assured if I left Suzune to you. But I get the sense that isn't going to happen. Of course not. Kiyotaka instantly shut him down. All the Kyo Horikta shippers are crying right now. That's no good. You do know saying something like that can become a flag, right? It was Tachibana who interrupted the conversation. She must have been listening for a while now. Flag? Questioned Manabu. The girl Tachibana be definitely playing Enoge. I know her. I know she be getting from money. I know this. She explained that it was something like situational irony, where two people never thought they would go out, but they actually end up going out. But the two looked at each other, not understanding Tachibana's explanation just now. Never mind, she said, and just left it at that. Now back in class, Hirata read through all the documents that had been left by them. It was Class A's 10 events they chose. Kiyotaka summarized everything on the board. They were surprised. There were so many sporting events, as well as 4 academic tests with a lot of participants, showing their confidence within it. After all, they have gotten all the highest average scores in all the classes for all the tests. Plus, he went through all these events. They began to strategize. There was no way they could tell what events would be chosen on the day, so practicing for one event would be a lost cause. They couldn't overlook any of the events. No matter what was picked, it was all troublesome. Some time passed in case they called out Hirata to the hallway with Kiyotaka. She wanted him to get info on the 5 events Class A would really pick. He said it wouldn't be easy to get their hands on such information. In the process, he came up with a method for this. That method being to get the former leader within Class A, Katsuragi, to help them. You see, in the class vote, Katsuragi's biggest supporter was expelled. Therefore, he holds a grudge against Class A's sakyanagi. They really have no choice. Horikta didn't like this idea, therefore Keisei asked Kiyotaka to help. He told him he'd think about it and I'll let him know. After school, Hirata called Kiyotaka asking if they could speak in person. He opted to go to Hirata's place instead. Soon after he arrived and was welcomed inside by her. She said she was just prepping dinner and to come in and sit. Kiyotaka peeped into her room and he was horrified. There was posters of Manabu. No, I'm like, her room is normal. Chill out. But Kiyotaka thought it was being set up for a trap and he felt like standing. "You what?" said Hirata, not comfortable by this. Kiyotaka was really about to stand the whole time, like, because he really thought it was a trap. I can't with this, man. He then sat after hearing Hirata sound harsh. She mentioned that both her parents worked full-time and she practiced cooking. After she found out Manabu went to this school, she took it upon herself to practice even more, like a true Brokon. She was preparing to live alone before coming to the school. After a few minutes, she had finished cooking and set the table. Kiyotaka thought if Suda were to see this, he would throw a punch in rage. Which, to be honest, he isn't wrong. This man Suda would have a meltdown. He may even slap Kiyotaka. They began to eat, and even Kiyotaka said she was a good cook, but Hirata didn't seem too happy about it. Kiyotaka then asked, "Have you been treating Suda to meals like this?" "Why would I be cooking for him?" Like Kiyotaka explained, "You're always helping him study." Hirata said that has nothing to do with cooking. And if he was the one helping her study, then she'll be more inclined to do it. A reason Kiyotaka couldn't argue against. "I can't tell if you're smart or stupid." Kiyotaka thought he should have said this to her. Suda has obviously fallen for Hirata, but due to Hirata's growth, she probably isn't aware of such things like that yet. She said she came up with a plan and needs Kiyotaka's opinion, even adding, "You ate my food, didn't you?" Kiyotaka had realized the dirty trick she just used. She cooked for him, then asked for his help. He grabbed the notebook and saw the 10 events Class C had chosen, those being English, basketball, archery, swimming, tennis, table tennis, typing, soccer, piano, and rock, paper, scissors. The last one looking like a last-ditch effort, just in case things don't look too good for them. The notebook contained everything they needed for the exam, including Hirata's evaluation on who would be the best with an estimated success rate. Kiyotaka adds it was like the notebook exposed their whole class due to the amount of data within it. Hirata says she will continue adding to it, even including information of all of Class A's events too. Kiyotaka adds he has no problems with this, but he wants to add something too. Brought up one of Class A's events, that being chess. Although in the notebook the session was completely blank, as nobody in class was particularly good at it. Hirata says she hasn't put much thought into it and she's never played the game. The only one who has a grasp of the rules is Kiyotaka. I'd like you to be the one to participate in it, he adds, saying Hirata is the most suitable person for him to teach. Hirata saying it would just be easier for you because you wouldn't have to interact with anyone new. Kiyotaka said he would be lying if this wasn't a part of it. But chess took raw talent. Hirata being the only one in this situation Kiyotaka could rely on. She agreed and they made preparations to practice chess overnight until the exam. Kiyotaka knew Sakyanagi would pick chess, one of the 5 real events. Sure, Hirata would be in the match, but the real fight was between Sakyanagi and Kiyotaka. Full-time person, Hirata questioned Kiyotaka about the class vote exam. He would ask if Kiyotaka was the one to lure her taking action, going further to say it was Manabu who was the one to guide her, but it was truly Kiyotaka who was behind it. This wasn't a random guess, even said Hirata. Over time she connected the dots together. She came to this conclusion on her own. Kiyotaka knows Hirata has matured over the past year, and this was a fact that him and Manabu could both agree on. Hirata says she didn't have any evidence on it, but at this point she was almost sure of it. We can really see Hirata start to grow, and it really makes you wonder how much further she has to go. Kiyotaka knew her talent had started to unravel herself, but only once the discord with Manabu had been softened. She mentions that Kiyotaka looks uncomfortable, where he agrees saying it's because he's being interrogated. Just forget it then. Your attitude makes it clear that I won't be getting anything out of you. But that she cuts the conversation. Even Kiyotaka knows it'll be harder to manipulate her from behind the scenes from this point onwards. She said she wanted to ask one more thing, but Kiyotaka doesn't have the answer. An empowering look then came beyond Kiyotaka. It was Hirata's gaze, unwilling to let him get away. You really think we can win against Sakyanagi-san? Kiyotaka says it's not impossible. But this is just the impression he sees after seeing the in-depth notes by Hirata. He tells us she's been doing great so far, and thought to himself he wanted to thank Hirata for doing the work he wasn't able to do himself. The two of them then walk to the front door and he steps out the room. He thanks Hirata for the meal and asks her not to do something like that again. Kiyotaka now gets suspicious every time someone offers him a meal. Kiyotaka will now get suspicious every time someone offers him a meal. Alright, I'll come up with something else. No, that's not what I mean. Says Kiyotaka, give me his last thought before I leave. Love these two. Like every girl Kiyotaka has a relationship with, like it's almost like really cool. Like with Kei and him, beautiful. Ichido's and him's really cute. Hirata, also cute. And then with like Kushido, you get like the really edgy, weird stuff. So every relationship he has is almost different, but nice in its own way. I love it. Move on a little and finally get an audience with Katsuragi. Keisei managed to contact him. Katsuragi, being smart, already knew what he was here for and asked what he would get in return for helping them out. Keisei stated that he would be welcomed into their class, saying one day they'll rise up to Class A. He said that if they really had the potential, then they could beat Class A without contacting him for help. Katsuragi added on further, saying that even if they had 20 million private points to do the transfer, but he already knew the answer was no, because if they did, Yamauchi wouldn't have gotten expelled. He said it was delusional, but they expected him to wait 2 years to prepare the private points. If they were able to reach Class A, there was no guarantee they would still have 20 million private points for him. Katsuragi understood Class C's situation. He understood they were desperate. He understood that they needed this. But betraying your classmate isn't such an easy task. Are you really fine with being silenced by Sakyanagi then? Really want to cling to Class A even though they got Totsuka expelled? Doing this ignited Katsuragi's emotions. He said to Keisei he's not trying to criticize him, but if he really wants to betray his class, then they have to be prepared. With his back up against the wall, he stared out into the distance. It wasn't like he was staring at something, almost like he was looking at nothing. That being, he has an unwavering hatred for Sakyanagi, and it's reason enough to tell him about the event they were planning without giving him anything in return. But sadly, Sakyanagi hasn't told anyone about the event she has chosen. The only thing Katsuragi could do was tell him about events he would think she would choose. He says this information is useful, and there'll be no need for 20 million private points. Katsuragi then lists the events he is most certain Sakyanagi would choose. One more thing, you said you wanted me to throw your matches for you as well, right? Katsuragi suddenly said this, but Keisei said he doesn't need to do this, even laughing at the fact they were happy over some little information. Katsuragi says they won't be able to beat Sakyanagi just over this. He said the only events they could help him with is flash mental arithmetic or long rope jumping if that even gets picked. He explains he doesn't want Sakyanagi to know he's throwing, therefore in some events he can make it look like he lost on accident. With that, Kiyotaka and Keisei agree on not telling Hirata and leave. Now in the class after school, Hirata is ready to get up and leave, but Hirata stopped him, saying she knows he doesn't want to talk to her, but he states that he doesn't need to practice for any of the events, but Sakyanagi is aware of his condition, so she may throw several events that include a large group of people, therefore he gets involved. She wanted to ask what he would do if this happens, but to her avail, Hirata just walks away, really showing the impact he had on the class. From being a leader to almost a ghost, he had really helped Class C in the past year, and this was showing. Yet again, Michan goes running, asking him to wait, and is followed by Kiyotaka. Hirata then replies. He asks Michan to stop and leave him alone. Like a sharp knife, these words for sure cut into her heart. But she didn't waver. She said she wouldn't leave him, not when he's like this. They go back and forth, and Hirata clenches his fist, almost looking like he's ready to get violent. He said the only way for him to go back to how he used to be is to bring back Yamauchi, but we all know that's impossible. He says he hopes Michan will never talk to him again, and is stopped as she grabs onto his arm. "Let go of me," he says, but she wouldn't waver and continued to hold. Hirata then sighed and raised his hand in the air forcefully, breaking her off. This movement caused Michan to fall onto the floor. "Stop bothering me already. If you don't, I'll... Seeing the anger in Hirata's eyes, Michan's heart was broken once again. All of a sudden, a man walked past. A man whose blonde flowing hair fluttered in the wind, sprinkled with a scent of cologne. It was the Giga Chad, Konji. Began to provoke Hirata, saying he has an unsightly look on his face. Konji told Hirata he's an eyesore to get out of his sight. Going further, he explained that if this isn't a suited school, then to show himself a door, pretty much asking him to drop out. Having been teased by Konji a little more, he locked eyes with him and began to close the distance. He tried to grab Konji by the collar of his shirt, but Konji quickly shut him down, grabbing his wrist. The expression of both pain and rage filled Hirata's face. Konji then said he is free to do what he wants, but he refuses to take orders for someone who made a girl cry. He then lets go of Hirata's wrist and tells him to help her back up as he was the one who knocked her down. "That's not my problem anymore," was the only thing Hirata could say. All of a sudden, Konji swooped up Michan from her feet like a princess. He said he would do the honors himself. His action left both Michan and Hirata at a loss of words. Konji goes full Prince Charming and says, "Your heart has been broken, and moreover, you've been injured. How about I help treat you?" Michan, flustered, said she wasn't hurt anywhere. Kiyotaka, watching from a distance, realizes that when Konji said treat her, he was alluding to her broken heart, not her physical injury. Put me down." "Haha, that won't do. You're already mine for the take after all." Konji wouldn't let Michan down, as almost he was like the prince, and she was the princess like I said. He then walked away and ignores Michan's continuous protesting. Hirata saw they're heading back to the dorms and decides to head in the other direction as he didn't want to be near the two anymore. Now back at the dorms, Kiyotaka gave Michan a bag and she went up the elevator to get away from Konji. He then approaches him in the lobby and questions him about Hirata. Konji said he didn't want to do that for the sake of the class, but did it for himself. Kiyotaka understood this was the rule of a thumb of Konji, and he only does what he wants to do. Konji then stated, "His existence is like a fly. That is absolutely irritating." What seemed to be the reason for what he just did. He tells Kiyotaka he has no interest in participating and to leave him out the exam, trusting him to make the correct decision. After a while, Kiyotaka leaves the dorm to search for Hirata. After an hour of searching, he sees him sitting on a bench. He calls his name as he walked up behind the bench. "Ayanokoji-kun." Hirata replied. His response came out slowly. It's been a long while since he's gone to see his face like this. It truly looked like he wasn't getting enough sleep. There were even dark patches under his eyes. He was truly broken. Kiyotaka asked if he can spare some time, to where Hirata's eyes opened up a little more. Hirata stated that he was sick and tired of everyone coming up to him, and thought of all the people Kiyotaka would leave him alone. But Kiyotaka wasn't having it. He put on the Black Air Forces, and he says, "Sorry, if you don't like it, why don't you push me away just like you did with Michan?" Hirata says he doesn't have anywhere to go and all the energy to run away, so it doesn't matter. He asked Kiyotaka what he wanted, and was met with a simple reply. "I want you to tell me your story." Hirata would question why, but Kiyotaka didn't know the answer himself. He just wanted to know for some reason. He then shook his head, saying he doesn't have the energy to talk about his past. Hirata turns and looks at him, question why he didn't already know the answer. But Kiyotaka asks once again, "Why is it?" Just ignoring the look he just gave him. "It's because Yamauchi got expelled." Hirata was forced to say the things he didn't want to say. He asked why Yamauchi's expulsion has to do with his past, and kept prying more to tell him. What Kiyotaka really wanted to know was what happened to Hirata's past. What really installed these values into Hirata. He wanted to know. He thought Hirata probably wanted to get everything off his chest, and ended up like this because he had no way to do it. Which I can sort of relate to. And just humans in general, like, you're gonna take a little lesson of Asu Sensei right here. If we keep things in our system, we eventually break. And that's what happened to Hirata. He has all these emotions in him and all these thoughts inside of him, but he can't get out to anyone. And they just kept piling up, and eventually, he cracked. He broke, and is the figure we are seeing today. It's just a natural occurrence for us humans. This time Kiyotaka took a different route, and spoke to Hirata with his eyes, looking at him forcefully, like he was threatening him to speak. Seeing that, a sense of fear welled up in Hirata's heart. He spoke, saying he understood why Kei decided to tell Kiyotaka everything. It was because Kei once saw these very eyes. No, it was Kiyotaka who showed her these eyes, that lay dormant with a deep darkness. Kiyotaka slowly ate away at the darkness held within Hirata. He stated that he wasn't simply wanting to die, but day after day he'd been praying for someone to save him. The only thing Hirata could do is reach up by the black spider's silk that dangled before him and climb up from the depths of hell. Hirata then brings up a story he told Kiyotaka partly. This is a friend by the name of Sugimura, a man who Hirata wanted to help from bullies, but was too scared that he would be targeted. As a result, Hirata watched from the side. What then led to his friend committing suicide, jumping off a building. Bro, how the fuck do I cover 2 volumes where people managed to kill themselves? Like, it was the Butler in volume 7, and now it's like Sugimura here? What is my luck, yo? This is depressing. Hirata began to open up a little, saying the boy was still alive but has been in a coma ever since. Clasping his hands together, the only thing he could say was his decisions led to Sugimura to take his own life. Hirata felt the weight of his sins would never fade. Kiyotaka says the blame falls on the bullies, but he replies saying by a bystander is equally as guilty. Hirata was someone who always searched for a solution. This explains him protecting Kei and them acting like a couple. Hirata continues the story and stated that he thought this would all be over, but he was wrong. After a while, the bullies began to pick on another kid. Something that only could be described as a murderous impulse then flashed across his eyes. He knew he couldn't let this continue and mentioned he took actions. Hirata explained that he tried to take control through the class by fear-mongering. He mentioned that he's not good at fighting like Sudo or ryuuen, but he mentions there aren't many people who can seriously hit someone. Even if Hirata was serious enough to throw a punch, nobody would be willing to hit him back. Mr. Hirata stand at the top of his class, getting rid of all the bullying. He knew his actions were no different from bullying, it was the only way to get a moment of peace. Kiyotaka thought there was no way the school hasn't heard of this, but realized it's probably the only reason they let him enroll here. What's true? Just look at the school and tell me the students are normal, like Jesus, we got crazy bitches like Kushida, and straight up menaces like fucking ryuuen. Hirata couldn't forgive himself for letting Yamaguchi get expelled. He says he was useless and never should have tried to keep the class together. He thought to use fear tactics again, but thought he should know better. And I feel like if he did, it wouldn't really work too well exactly. Like, Sudo would whoop his ass, I think, and then Kiyotaka would also probably whoop his ass, but I'm not too sure if he would, like, show that to the class. And Koji's different story. Koji would kill him. His voice trembled. The man's heart was on the brink of collapsing. He couldn't bear the thought of someone suffering, let alone disappearing. Kiyotaka had thought of all the things people were saying to him. There's nothing you could have done. It's not your fault, Hirata-kun. Everyone said the same thing. This couldn't help Hirata. So Kiyotaka did the one thing he could. He said it's not Hirata's fault, not his own doing. Then he asked a question to Hirata, asking whose fault he thought it was. Hirata replied saying he thinks Yamaguchi has no one to blame but himself. That's not true. Kiyotaka denying the words Hirata just muttered and stated that it's your fault Yamaguchi got expelled. He went on further to say Hirata should have done everything in his power to stop him from getting expelled. Hirata said he tried his best and there was nothing he could have done. But Kiyotaka wasn't having it and he decided to fire on him. He said it should know his class didn't lose anyone and it's no excuse we didn't have the points. If Hirata wanted to save everyone, he should have been saving just like Class B. It was his failure as a leader. Hirata said that's impossible since they had 0 class points at the start of the year, to which Kiyotaka replied saying that's also a part of his failure. Unreasonable. That's unreasonable was the only thing Hirata could say. Kiyotaka knew this was unreasonable, but it couldn't be helped. If Hirata wanted to live in this fantasy of saving everyone, then he should have came up with a way to protect this idea. He has to take full responsibility. Kiyotaka still wouldn't let him speak. He continued, said he has the wrong idea about Hirata. He thought he was an honest student, a man of character, but no. He sees him as a shallow, incompetent student who boasts about the things he can't do. That's the person Hirata Yosuke is. Kiyotaka knew some of these things weren't true, but this was the only way. He knew there was nothing wrong with Hirata, wanted to protect everyone, but blamed him. He forced the blame until the very end, driving Hirata into a corner until he was about to break. Kiyotaka wasn't doing this for Hirata's sake, or to empower him. He was doing this because the class needed Hirata. For the class to function at 100%, they need Hirata normal again. Just how long are you going to keep dreaming? Kiyotaka asked, forcing him to wake up from this fantasy in his head. This is your true nature, isn't it? Your words are terrible, ruthless, cold, were the only things Hirata could say as tears began welling up in his right eye. And not before long, they turned into full-on tears. He began to cry. Kiyotaka says he can fix what he wants, but if he wants to see his wishes come true, then he has to do whatever he can. If more people get expelled on the way, he has to accept it. He has to keep moving forward. Tataka, oh shit, my bad, wrong series. Kiyotaka then told him if he stops here, then more students will fail and disappear. So he has to keep walking forward. By doing that, it'll leave people standing behind him once it's all over. Hirata then asks how he can vent frustrations and wonders if he has to walk alone. But he doesn't. Kiyotaka says he's ever feeling troubled, he can rely on his classmates. Horikita, Kushida, Sudo, Ike, and even Michan. It doesn't matter. Just someone. Class C is in this together. Wonder if it's okay for someone like me to lead everyone. Stuttering, Hirata asks his question. Kiyotaka then places his hand on Hirata's shoulder, saying it's okay as he is now. He can take the lead. With this, tears began to fall. Hirata, who was struck, began to move again. Thank you. Thank you, Ayanokoji-kun, hanging his head with countless of tears falling from his face. Kiyotaka states that men are troublesome, difficult creatures who can't cry in front of others very easily. So he wanted a friendship where no one was forced to hide their feelings from one another. No more words were needed to be said. All he needed was a friend by his side. As long as he had that, the man known as Hirata Yosuke could start walking again. Next time on Classroom of the Elite. The final special exam starts. Class C is tense, and the dragon rises from the ashes yet again.